there's kind of a loss of fitness in the fitness industry, and people are getting really in the weeds with a lot of this stuff, as we'll go into. And so I think we both kind of got to a point where we realized that I think people need a little more help than injecting 87 things.
Should we just refrain from calling it the fitness industry, but call it the drug industry?
Yeah, it's trending in that direction.
Not sure if it's partially my fault, but hey, I started my YouTube channel with bodybuilding. I did nutrition videos, and I did supplement videos and training videos, but nobody wanted to see that. So now it's all drug videos. And now we have like a whole new generation of TikTok and Instagram influencers making 1-minute drug videos and trying to educate people that way, which is all a derivative of this podcast. Let's be fucking honest here. Gentlemen, it's the Anabolic Roundtable, episode 13. It's 2 days ahead of Friday the 13th, so we should have waited 2 days to make it a double whammy. But last episode was not too long ago. I've been very, very lazy in the meantime. I've been taking care of things that I've been procrastinating about instead of making YouTube videos. But I'm happy to have you two on board again. Kurt Havens, Dr. Dean St. Mart, back for another round of the Anabolic Roundtable. What's up with you guys? Kurt, you're wearing a very nice hoodie, or not a hoodie. What's a scully, right?
It's cold in here.
It's cold in here.
Cranked up. It's hot outside. Air conditioning's high.
See, you're wearing winter clothes in the air conditioning, man. I should do that as well. Any updates on your cycle, or no? Just cruising along.
No, cruising. I've just been pushing more cardio and stuff. I'm just trying to accomplish different things. I ran 20 miles last week.
Oh wow!
Just for the heck of it.
How's the knees?
I mean, I've run most of my life, so they're fine.
Okay.
I figured I would try different fitness goals.
Yeah.
You know,
sometimes you need a new challenge, right?
Yeah, and AJ Sims and I are partnering on some online education stuff, not specifically, kind of a different take on fitness than what's out there. We're not really discussing anabolics. I mean, we'll go into some TRT or TRT plus stuff, but it's more geared toward being an optimal man. So it's geared more toward men and just what it means to be a leader, a father, a husband, a partner, where fitness
fits in. There's a huge market for that. There's a huge market.
There's been really, I guess to sum it up, there's kind of a loss of fitness in the fitness industry, and people are getting really in the weeds with a lot of this stuff, as we'll go into. And so I think we both kind of got to a point where we realized that I think people need a little more help than injecting 87 things.
Should we just refrain from calling it the fitness industry, but call it the drug industry?
It's trending.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's trending in that direction. So we're going to try.
Not sure if it's partially my fault. But hey, I started my YouTube channel with bodybuilding. I did nutrition videos, and I did supplement videos and training videos, but nobody wanted to see that.
No.
So now it's all drug videos. And now we have like a whole new generation of TikTok and Instagram influencers making 1-minute drug videos and trying to educate people that way, which is all a derivative of this podcast. Let's be fucking honest here. Let me emphasize, let's be fucking honest here. It's all just copy and paste shit. I get my own information regurgitated back to me, but wrong. Isn't that? I'm like, what the fuck? Anyway, so I think we can call it the drug industry now. And, contributing that with some masculinity and how to behave yourself and how to conduct yourself, I think will be a warm welcome. Because I'm appalled. And I unsubscribe more, unfollow more than I follow. Or restrict their hide. Yeah. And I'm not even on trend, dude. Like if I was on trend, I would get it. But I'm just on TRT now, tuner test. Running a little bit of this Ngenla experiment, which is fun. A little bit watery, but it's not too bad. Yeah. So not sleepy though. I would expect to be sleepy all day from this Ngenla, but so far so good. I know Kurt has its own ideas on it. Give me 10 more days, then I'm running on the third pen. I'll do some blood work, and then I'll see what the results were.
What's the dose?
10 milligrams or 6 milligrams per day. So if you discount for the HCG subunit, it would literally translate based on the molecular weight to 10 IU's growth hormone per day.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm taking basically like MK677 for 3 people without the ravenous appetite. Well, I had a ravenous appetite, but that was after 3 days of sugar fasting. Not a good idea. We'll discuss that too. But so far, so good. Yeah, I'm full. I'm slowly getting leaner, as you would expect from growth hormone. My hair is growing super fast. My nails are growing super fast because I haven't used growth hormone for the entirety of the year because people want me to do that follistatin experiment, the epicatogen and the YK11 and the follistatin 344, which is something else. My God, we'll discuss that maybe, and otherwise there'll be a video about it soon. But being back on the growth hormone now, 20 days, I like it. I like it. It does something. And less edema around my ankles and hands compared to 10 I use generics or 10 I use pharmaceutical. Maybe it's because it's a longer acting one. Well, or maybe because it's shit.
It's really designed to, it's what's designed to mimic the placental secretion, which is not IGF-1, it's IGF-2. It's to protect the fetus. Right? So as women moves on in pregnancy, the estrogen keeps going up and up and up, just like modern bodybuilders. And the IGF, it's basically binding the IGF to prevent it from harming the fetus, and it's also preventing it from causing muscular growth in the mother, right? Because that's not advantageous in a state where you need extra calories to grow another human. And then the placenta will then excrete IGF-2 to the fetus, not 1. So if the placenta was secreting IGF-1, the problem is the fetus would grow too large to deliver the baby. So it delivers IGF-2, which is not going to have the same muscular effect that IGF-1 will have. We're really not sure what even IGF-2 does. And that's what that drug was designed to do, is just to mimic. So while you could call it long-acting GH, it's not necessarily mimicking the response that we're looking for.
Right.
As fitness people. Right. That doesn't mean it won't do something. I don't know. I usually tell people just to avoid it because it's not, I don't think it's going to do what, it's like any of these other things. Everyone wants to jump on this new and fancy.
Yeah. That's half the fun, Kurt. You got to keep expanding your portfolio of drugs because it's a drug community. We can't just talk about, drop sets and supersets and reps in reserve anymore because there's no new science there. Well, some people think that there's new science, but I think the tried and proven hard training still stands. So we got to, we got a sugar diet and a carnivore diet before that, but the drugs keep evolving. So that's what we got to put our efforts to. And Ngenla is one of them, man. So TRT and Ngenla for me, albeit a dose for 3 people. Dean, I heard you're on the Tremboloni sandwich again.
We are, 3 weeks? 4? I can't remember now at this point. Maybe 4.
Neurotoxicity, man.
I'm starting to slowly forget. I think it was 4. I can't remember when I started the diet now, to be honest. Because before, it's just day-to-day living.
I think it was 4 weeks before episode 1. So it's been 14 months now. 14 months. And 20 milligrams Tremboloni pre-workout.
So, and that's actually, we reduced. Remember, we said we'd go from 40 to 20, so it's 10 twice per week. And the train is chewing along as it's supposed to. So I obviously put the photo up from last week's training. Fullness is back. I'm getting leaner. I want to see how far I can push without having to do structured cardio. And just a baseline activity, which is 7,000, 8,000 steps. We've got 9 weeks to our vacation, so I'll give it another 2 weeks.
Wait. You're taking Tren for your vacation?
Well,
I'm going to start this podcast off with so much cynicism.
We'll see. Obviously, the experiment was to keep the TRT as it was, and to prove what could be done if you add in this small little bump of a very androgenic compound for training, for moods, for lipolysis, add in the 25 apples 4 days a week as well. And then see what that synergy between.
Well, there's 2 kinds of apples. There's very round and full apples, and there's very hard and dense apples.
I was thinking he's talking about hard and dense.
Yeah, I think it's a hard and dense one. That sounds like a good dose. The round and full, they're about half an apple too short.
I was going to say at least, if not 4 apples too short.
Now we might put in some super apples towards the end if we really want to take the absolute Mickey on the beach, but. So between that, it's 245 total per week, which is someone's TRT.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very interested to see, obviously, bloods. I expect bloods to change slightly, more so probably lipids, but so far so good. So far so good. I mean, the physique is changing with no change to nutrition. Like last year's prep, food's still high. I had that trace gluten exposure 2 weeks ago from so obviously in the house you can't say to the kids you can't eat gluten because daddy can't eat gluten. So I was eating my dinner and he was eating a cereal bar beside me, and I think somehow some crumbs got into my food. I wasn't paying attention, but I literally woke up the next day on Monday and I was 8 months pregnant.
Yeah, I showed it to my wife. She's like full term now. She's like, oh, congratulations, Dean. Look more pregnant than her.
I mean, breaking it into, I kept putting it off, or mentally, you're like, I must do a 5-day fast. I must do a 5-day fast just for gut health. That morning, I was like, tomorrow, okay, yep, no eating until Saturday, which obviously kick-started the whole diet, because then I was like, right, now I can start the diet from Monday.
You upregulated your fibroblast growth factor 21 with no carbs.
Without eating a lot of Haribos.
Yeah.
Which we can get into. But obviously the fast this time around was a bit strange, because towards the end of the 4th day, in my mind I had it set that I was going to beat my record, which is like 5.5 days, 5 hours, 5 days, 13 hours. That I said, right, that's like Saturday midday. If I get to like Saturday evening, I've broken my record. And then Friday, heading into Saturday, my mood that evening just started to tank, which obviously is genetics. So I've got very fast MAOA genetics. So my serotonin turnover is really, really quick. By that point, not feeding my body protein and amino acids, my turnover of neurotransmitters started to tank, and my mood was starting to become rubbish. And I thought, I can't last until Saturday evening feeling this way. So I thought, okay, Friday evening, break my fast, which at that point was 5 days, which was more than enough time.
It's fine. Yeah, the most I've ever gone to was 6.5 days, and the last 2 was horrendous. And it's with some L-tryptophan in there and fluvoxamine just to keep me going. So all you want to do is sit on the couch and watch TV. You can't do anything at that point. You're so depleted. I asked the ChatGPT what's like the ideal ratio between fasting and a ketogenic diet. And it came to the conclusion that fasting for 2 to 3 days, followed by 3 to 4 days of a ketogenic diet, is basically the best for fat loss. But that's ChatGPT.
Which is interesting, because for correct like mitochondrial function, you need glucose metabolism to happen, which is where there's like a trade-off between a ketogenic diet improving insulin sensitivity, but on the other side, making your mitochondria slightly less efficient, because of you're not really going down that glycolysis pathway for oxidative phosphorylation. It's free fatty acid oxidation, creating pyruvate and NADH through that method.
So what about if we just hammer the SLU and the PP332 and the MART-C and the methylene blue and no carbs? And pyruvate supplements, you can buy those over the counter, right? For a stack of 4.
I think, like that with anything, if you have the knowledge there, that's sort of where historically ketogenic diets would get you so far. And then you start to run into some issues with mitochondrial efficiency of having to bring calories down to keep losing body fat, regardless of a high carb diet versus a low carb diet. And that's where in the last probably 1.5 to 2 years, the whole thing of keeping carbs as high as possible in a contest scenario is what a lot of people are doing and finding benefit, because of improved training performance from glycogen, improved mitochondrial function because of glycolysis and feeding into the electron transport chain. That it's very rare you see guys, unless they prefer, like if fatty acid oxidation is that person's preferred energy pathway, then, everyone has their own individual biochemistry. A low carb ketogenic diet might suit your biochemistry better. But we're seeing a shift away from like having to go extremely low carb on purpose, when that person's body might actually favor carbs and glycolysis as their way of creating energy to allow them to perform and train better.
I mean, as a whole, humans would prefer glucose.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So where do you guys want to get started first? This sugar fast diet or the Trevogrumab and the Garetosmab? What did you get more direct messages for? Let's start there. For me, it was the GDF8 and the activin inhibitors. But let me know where you want to get started.
Got me a lot of texts.
Yeah, Dean, you too?
I split between the two. Obviously, between my fast of eating nothing and then someone going, well, why don't you eat a load of sugar during your fast? I think we can go either way. I think let's start with the monoclonal antibodies. And I guess this is a whole other dimension of compounds we're heading into that from a pharmacology perspective would be classed as biologics, which we're going to see very, very expensive biotechnological drugs that most people need medical support or medical, referral in order to get the funding to take these compounds.
Yeah, so I already did the research on how much it costs. And basically, if you want to stick with the clinical trial dosage, the safety and efficacy study, not the clinical trials where they look at particular muscle wasting diseases or other kinds of issues where it was shown to be beneficial, just in healthy individuals. In the men where it was shown to be beneficial at the highest dosages, we're talking about 6 to 10 milligrams. And then sourcing that through some of the online chemical websites where they have, high purity compounds. It will cost you $1.5 million for 13 weeks.
Yeah.
So fund it, guys.
Started GoFundMe, and Steve will gladly.
I will gladly do it. I mean, I'm sure. So I went to Sigma Aldrich. He can't find it there. Let me just share my screen real quick so you guys know exactly what's going on. So I found this website, Medchem Express, and they sell Trevogrumab, Regen 1033, and 5 milligrams cost you $1,500. Now, I'm sure you can get a better quote for 10 milligrams and 50 milligrams, but you have to contact them. So if you divide 1,500 milligrams or $15,000 by 5, you get about $300, right? And for Garetosmab, Regen 2488, the price here listed is $1,650, which was actually lower before. So they bumped up the price. So that's $165 for 1 milligram. But if you go to the clinical trial dosages, let me see. This is the one. And guys, I'll link everything down below, obviously. So here you can see this is a single dose blockade of a GDF8 and activin A antibodies, monoclonal antibodies. So that's Trevogrumab and Garetosmab. Increasing lean body mass and increased fat mass. This is in healthy individuals who did not exercise, so that's promising. And then here you see change from baseline of thigh muscle volume determined with an MRI. If they combine anti-activin A, which is Garetosmab, and anti-GDF8, that's Trevogrumab, at 10 milligrams and 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, you see the most change. And you see that across the board. When you combine both of these compounds at the highest dosages, you basically see the most change in lean mass and, other things. So if you calculate that to something that's useful, so if you go with Trevogrumab, the anti-GDF8, aka anti-myostatin, the highest human clinical trial dosage is 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight intravenous every 2 weeks, which means based on what I just found on this Medchem Express, at $300 per 1 milligram, a 3-month supply injected 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight every 2 weeks for a 100 kilogram bodybuilder would run you $1,080,000. And that's just one compound. Garetosmab, the anti-activin A monoclonal antibody, the highest human clinical trial dosage is 10 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, intravenous every 4 weeks. So at least the administration is less often. At $165 per 1 milligram, a 3-month cost for a 100 kilogram bodybuilder would be $495,000. So it's basically $1.5 million to run the dosages which were shown to be efficacious in the clinical trials.
For 3 months.
For 3 months. And that would be like a cycle. Of course, these studies are like an injection at week 1, 2, 4, 6, and 8, or 1, 4, and then follow-up for up to 20 weeks, where, you know, the results were quite pronounced. And again, that's in sedentary individuals that are otherwise healthy. So not people who are obese and then take semaglutide to get the obesity under control. That's an animal model where, you know, you lose insulin sensitivity, obviously, on the skeletal muscle. Your skeletal muscles shrinks a little bit in that process in a high-fat, high fructose diet. Your muscle shrinks a little bit. And then they would take semaglutide and Trevogrumab, or semaglutide and Garetosmab. And then the fat mass would go away and the lean muscle comes back to a certain extent, but maybe higher than baseline. Or there's less lean muscle loss due to the semaglutide. Now, these animals, they don't exercise. These animals don't take a high-protein diet, so they're not very similar to us. And even these healthy individuals, macronutrient intake was not tracked, right? Training was not tracked. And even then, it shows that lean muscle mass goes up. And again, these healthy individuals, they don't have insulin resistance, or they weren't fed a high-fat diet, high fructose diet. So in this case, there's no loss of insulin sensitivity on the skeletal muscle, but muscle actually goes up. And you see the same thing with SARMs. You see the same thing with ACE083 and ACE081 or 31, which were, let's see, there were follistatin or myostatin inhibitors as well. I did a deep dive on that. And even with follistatin 344, you see similar results. Now, I ran follistatin 344 for 3 fucking weeks at 1 milligram per day. And even though the results were good, they were not as good as steroids. Does anybody know anybody that took steroids and got muscle mass and fat loss at the same time comparable to these results? Raise your hand.
Yeah, pretty much.
These results resemble TRT, dude.
I mean, when you look at what changed there, even on the first graph, it was a 6% change in thigh mass. So let's say you've got a 100 kilo male, and for argument's sake, if we have about 40% of our body weight in our lower limbs, and each leg weighs 20 kilos, it's not a lot. You know, 6% of 20 kilos, you know, 1.2 kilograms that you've gained, which when you actually look at what 1.2 kilograms, which is what, 2.2 pounds, 2.3 pounds of muscle tissue, what that actually looks like as a piece of meat going onto your quads, it's not a huge amount for
I don't think you can see the
million.
difference visually.
That's 1.5 million to add, in theory, from this result, you know, maybe 2-3 pound of muscle tissue.
You might notice it if you wear skinny jeans. That's it. Now, okay, that's without training, right? That's without training. So it is promising. But I think if you go on TRT, you'll gain that 1.2 pound or kilos also on your leg.
Yeah, depending on how androgen deficient you are, you know, your metabolic flexibility, your ability to train, recover, everything else like that, IGF-1 turnover. It's interesting, but it's going to be more interesting which wins then between this or Bioglutide. Because at the end of the day, Bioglutide is coming in with the IGF-1 peptide aspect attached to GLP, GIP, and ghrelin, glucagon, sorry. That you now have a compound that stops this muscle wastage that can occur with not eating properly with GLPs.
And I think Bioglutide will hit the market well before Trevogrumab or Garetosmab hits, because I contacted all the sources to see if it was available at a cheaper price. And not in the pipeline either.
Well, the problem is monoclonal antibodies are very difficult to produce. You can't, like, someone can buy a peptide synthesizer and basically give it the recipe, have all the amino acids in the vials, and you literally just tell it the coupling recipe and it just builds it like building a cake. To do monoclonal antibodies, you have, well, normally in the past they were used ovarian hamster cells, so CHOs, and you basically grew these antibodies. So you gave the recipe to the antibody and then you purified them from these ovarian cells. And they're biologics for a reason, because there then is a high potential for contamination risk. And obviously with misfolded proteins, we can have high risk also. Peptides more so don't have that necessarily risk, because the tertiary structure of a peptide doesn't interact to the same extent as a protein structure. It does still have a 3D structure and a tertiary structure, but it's not as critical that if you take a misfolded protein substance, which is like a prion, that you're going to end up with problems.
Mm-hmm.
With these monoclonal antibodies, if there is a small change in the sequence within the antibody protein, now you're going to start targeting other things and not what you're targeting to block. Because really what these antibodies do is they block receptors.
Yeah. So you have these monoclonal antibodies that block receptors, and then you have ACE031, ACE083. Those were decoy receptors for myostatin. So it's basically follistatin and then modified. If I remember correctly, ACE083 was rapidly deactivated in the bloodstream. So they would administer that in a bolus shot of 240 or 120 milligrams intramuscularly. And that was shown to only cause localized muscle growth, but not anywhere else. And what I'm wondering with these monoclonal antibodies is that if you take that systemically, again, all these clinical trials were done intravenously. If you take this systemically and you combine that with something like semaglutide or retatrutide, which is what basically in the pipeline is, right? They want to combine this with GLP-1s and prevent muscle wasting because these people don't eat correctly and don't exercise, which is actually highlighted in one of the discussions of the studies. I can show you that later on. What happens is with semaglutide, tirzepatide, retatrutide, your resting heart rate goes up. And then what starts happening if you start blocking the activin and the myostatin in your heart? Do you now get heart enlargement? Hasn't been studied, but that will be my first concern. Now, I take Clen and stimulants, and of course, I already have LVH from the steroids that I took, but this would be my main concern for general population that doesn't exercise, doesn't do cardio to keep that ventricular contraction and ejection fraction under control. If you start increasing your resting heart rate with 5 to 10 points by megadosing semaglutide or retatrutide later on, and then combining it with these kinds of medications, sounds like it's a recipe for heart enlargement, which you're not going to mitigate by doing your daily fasted cardio. And then what's the next combination medication? A fucking beta blocker? Right? So it hasn't been investigated in any of the clinical trials regarding resting heart rate, or I try to look through it, right? All of the clinical trials that investigate these kinds of medications. Cardiac function is not investigated.
And do you really want to block activin? I mean, it's going to stop stem cell proliferation, right?
I think one of the concerns was bone density as well.
Yeah.
And tendon laxity. I mean, yeah, I mean, I like how they think outside the box, but monoclonal antibodies, I think, are more, in my view, more beneficial for targeting a specific pathogen or something like that, where we can go in and, like with before the mass rollout of what medicine was rolled out in the 2020s, one of the theories that I've suggested was, why aren't we making a monoclonal antibody against this problem? And it was cost. It was a lot more difficult to scale a monoclonal antibody against the ACE receptor of this problem that we had in the world than it was to create a transcription product that you give out to everyone.
Yeah.
So here's just something I'm going to show you in one of the studies. So here, this is the investigation in the animal models that they use mice and macaque monkeys to see how these monoclonal antibodies behave in the context of a high-fat, high-fructose diet. And here they say in the discussion, while it has been shown that moderate exercise can lead to healthier weight loss with GLP-1 receptor agonists, it is difficult to get patients to adhere to such regimens outside of controlled trials. So this is, doesn't fall within the fitness community or the drug community, where most of us actually do go to the gym. In addition, there is some evidence that patients started on GLP-1 receptor agonists may actually decrease their physical activity. Thus, widespread use of GLP-1 receptor agonists may result in widespread public health concerns. So by prescribing GLP-1s, people exercise less because they have less energy because they eat less. Where in reality, you just need to put them on a diet and exercise program and then use GLP-1 later on. Let's see. Causes widespread public health concerns, particularly in individuals with obesity or low lean muscle mass and the elderly. So it's hard to get people to adhere to clinic exercise in clinical trials because people are lazy as fuck.
Well, yeah, it's the pill for an ill, and what can reverse environmentally induced problems. Obviously, we've touched on before. Yes, there's some genetic aspects to it, but if we're going to use these to combat muscle wastage in GLP-1 use, we already see that once GLPs are generally stopped, people regain most of the weight they lost.
Yeah.
If they never addressed the dietary habits and things that happen in the first place.
Yeah, and with GLP-1s, it's very important just to change your dietary habits, because if you suppress your appetite, it's very important to at least get the protein and the healthy fats in. And then at least provide your body with nutrients. But you see this over and over again. Yeah, I went on semaglutide and I lost bone mineral density. Yes, because you kept eating the same garbage that got you fat, but now you eat less of that garbage, and now you don't even get calcium in your diet. When in reality, you should be eating your proteins, your vegetables, and healthy fats, and maybe some carbs to fill up the macronutrients, and shut the fuck up, and then live a healthy lifestyle. But people don't do that. That's what general population does. They go on a GLP-1 and then they go to McDonald's less. They go to Cheesecake Factory less, which is great. They lose weight that way, but half of the weight is coming from muscle mass. They don't change their lifestyle. They don't go to the gym. And I think this muscle loss that occurs with GLP-1s is purely because they lack the knowledge and the perseverance to go to the gym and eat healthy, which in reality...
It's how they got fat in the first place.
What got them fat in the first place. It's true. It's a lifestyle disease. And how they could get themselves out of this fat and obese and disgusting lifestyles by eating healthy and going to the gym. And then when you do need to control your appetite later on, okay, use GLP-1 from 12% body fat onwards or something, or 10%, when you can't control your appetite, when it's been 6 months on a diet.
Yeah, when I don't know if I said this last time, there's 900 some odd genes that control BMI. But yet 96% of obesity is lifestyle related. So they're doing it because they're lazy.
Mm-hmm.
And using GLPs, might be lazy. I think hunger signaling is very important when you diet, right? So when bodybuilders use it, that feedback is needed, so you understand what your body's doing. I think that there's very few examples that it's warranted. I see lots of guys try to use it when they're at some mediocre level of body fat. If you can't get pretty darn lean without using stuff like that, perhaps that ain't the sport for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but guys had shredded glutes way before these silly drugs existed.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's warranted in certain contexts where you have a lot of responsibilities and you'd want to take away the food noise. Like some people have worse food noise than others.
But you need to learn to condition yourself to that.
Yeah.
Right. And that noise is your body's telling you need to learn how to deal with that and cope with it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, I interact with thousands of people. I see very few people who are truly starving. Right. You see a bodybuilder eating 3,000 calories and he's crying about how hungry he is. Most of the world doesn't even eat that much. It's gotten to a place that, like I said before, we've completely removed fitness from fitness. And now we're just trying to take as many different chemicals as we can to bypass any sort of responsibility about our health or fitness, right? We all want to look a certain way, but no one's willing to actually do the work to get there, right?
Thank God for TRT and GLP-1 receptor agonists, man. Now everybody can get results. Yeah, which we still don't see. You go to Disneyland, you still see fat people.
Yeah, of course. It's not changing anything. When those people come off the GLPs, they're going to be just as fat.
Yeah.
They didn't ever learn how to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the study shows, they don't exercise. I mean, is that groundbreaking stuff that if you exercise, weight loss is healthier? I mean, do they even
and sustained?
Yeah. Like, does that even need to be written?
Yeah, it's weird, huh? It's weird, and it seems like Mike Israel made a video about these compounds, and everybody lost their shit and started flooding my inbox. But it's the same thing that happened with SARMs, with Ostarine, where you saw these kinds of dramatic changes, where without exercise, where muscle mass goes up and fat mass goes down. You see this in TRT studies, where fat mass goes down and muscle mass goes up. You see this with follistatin studies, with ACE-083 and ACE-031. And at least those are available, but this is not available.
$1 million, even if they're available.
No, but everybody that's raving about this shit says that it's the next best thing, but they haven't even fucking tried it yet.
No.
So why are you opening your mouth? I hate to say it, but why are you opening your fucking mouth when you haven't tried this stuff yet and praising to the God that this is going to be the next best thing? At least use it first,
I mean, what I don't understand then with these biologics is the sheer cost. So if we are giving this to a human to reduce obesity, we are looking at someone who's like morbidly obese, who has no potential way of moving, if you wanted to put it that way, that they literally just sit and eat all day, that we're giving this drug to stop them from eating, to preserve the muscle mass in their body so that they don't waste away from no appetite at a cost of 1.5 million for 3 months.
Who's paying
and this
that?
is, this is a 100-kilo male. So let's take someone who is critically obese, 140, 150 kilograms. We're going into a territory where that cost even starts going up. And like Kurt said, then with biologics, you normally get an exemption and it's paid by your public health fund. You make a cause, like we have some monoclonal antibody compounds. So anything that ends with MAB is for monoclonal antibody, mAb. And there's just loads of them. If you search up
there's loads of them.
Formulatory books, you'll see all the monoclonal antibodies. And to be honest, some of the names get crazy that I don't even know how half of us remember them. But they are very specialized compounds that need exemptions to be prescribed. So it's great hype, but I don't see it filtering into the fitness industry.
No.
It's just...
Unless it's like $10 a bottle or $50 a bottle. But I don't think that, but follistatin is $80 a pop, like on the gray area market. If you go get it in China, it's maybe $17 to $25 per vial, depending on the quantity. So, and even that is expensive. Yeah, because compare that to GH. Let's say you need to run a vial of something to get results, like a vial of growth hormone 10 IUs, a vial of IGF-1 1 milligram, a vial of follistatin 344, 1 milligram. And the follistatin 344 is the most expensive, and you get the least results.
Well, because who said myostatin is the ultimate rate limit in this process?
It isn't. It's a total picture. It's a total picture, right?
It isn't, right?
And when you
those cows, and that's
if you really want to do like a myostatin follistatin cost to benefit comparison, injectable YK11 wins hands down out of all of these compounds because it's reasonably cheap. It doesn't really skew your lipids. It doesn't really skew your liver enzymes. It's readily available. The post-injection pain is minimal, and it's just an anabolic steroid. Which, YK11 has 2 or 3 studies on it. But, anecdotal experience, it's been around for 5 to 10 years now. There's a lot of anecdotal experience that we can learn from. And I get great results. So cost to benefit, I would say injectable YK11 wins out of all of these myostatin modulating compounds, including epicatogen and follistatin 344. And these are just the latest things that you can throw in the pile. But I don't think you would get that great of results even if it was $50 for a month for a bottle. And again, if you want to spend $1.5 million for 6% gain in muscle mass, dude, give that shit to me. I'll coach you through it, and I'll put you on TRT, and you'll get 6% additional muscle mass with maybe a little bit of growth hormone. And I'll put the rest in Bitcoin and laugh my way to the bank. It's funny how one video can send this entire fitness industry to crazy, and then I make a video about soboterone, which actually has a lot of promise and scientific evidence. Nobody watches it. Mart C, same thing. SLUPP3, okay, people burn that now, but stuff that's actually promising, that actually works, that we can actually use, it just completely overlooked. And then this is hyped beyond belief when nobody can use it. And again, guys, if you've used it, let me know down below. If you have the money to run it, let me know down below. And if you don't want to run it, but you have the money, send it to me. I'll gladly run it for you.
Oh, wait. Elon Musk is calling. He said he used it.
Yeah. Yeah, he would be. Yeah, you need some. You got a black eye recently. We're talking too much shit. Yeah. He could do with some monoclonal antibodies. But yeah, I think this is just one of those things that looks promising right now based on one study. Right? There's several different studies. There's animal models. There's one human clinical trial which looks promising. And that was the same for SARMs, and that turned out to be a fluke. So seeing is believing. Until that time, please stop DMing me about this shit. Because, there's been multiple compounds like this on the market, and none of them really did anything worth your money besides injectable YK11. I've tried all of them so far, So, yeah, I hope it ends now, but I don't think so. Hey, have you looked into Trevogrumab or Garetosmab? Oh, man. I'll link all the studies down below so you can read them yourself. It is very interesting, very promising, but until it hits the market, don't get your hopes up. And even when it hits the market, based on all of the compounds that I've tried so far in this category of drugs, I would say don't get your hopes up. And remember that, what is it, the $20,000, $25,000 follistatin gene therapy that's running around? All the guys that I know that tried it, that got it for free, said it didn't do shit. Literally didn't do shit. So what's the point? Use some fucking steroids and shut the fuck up.
I was going to say, why don't we just stick with things that have been proven to work?
Go read the Basin study and then shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
I mean, even all that CRISPR technology looks great, but going in and splicing sections of your genome to insert.
Well, again, maybe we don't use AI to design drugs. Bring the rats back.
Yeah, bring the rats back. Yeah, I know a girl who can do all the intraperitoneal injections. She's very popular on Instagram. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go over to the sugar fasting diet. It's making the rounds. Mark Bell is an advocate. Chase Irons is doing it right now. He's getting some good results. I did it for 3 days as per instructions of Fuel to Thrive. What is it called? Yeah, Fuel to Thrive 2.0. That's the ebook that Joe Binley wrote, the owner of Project AD. He's been around for a very long time. So he cordially sent me that ebook. I read front to back 3 times and then decided my own diet. I had some good results regarding body composition. Got full, got a little bit leaner the first 2 days. And then by the 3rd day, I went into a blood sugar roller coaster where I was hypo and hyper and I didn't feel good. And then it took me a week to get out of the cravings because my metabolism was boosted to the point that I couldn't stop eating. So first 3 days I got leaner and then I got fatter.
Yeah.
Where's the? It was fun though. It was fun though, eating a lot of fruit and honey, Manuka honey, very expensive Manuka honey imported, and then finishing the day off with some licorice from Haribo. Good stuff.
I mean, where's the common sense?
I mean, it does make sense on paper if you do the research about fibroblast growth factor 21 and upregulating mitochondrial function, improving insulin sensitivity, and then using the triglycerides and the free from fatty acids that are being liberated to kind of burn away the excess, right? In the caloric difference that you're making. It does make sense on paper, and there's plenty of people who get results from it. I just don't think it's sustainable. And I don't think it's suitable for everybody because my blood glucose levels were all over the place by day 3. And that's following exactly the adherence of what needs to be done, And of course, I come from a ketogenic diet. My insulin sensitivity might be a little bit different than other people. It might be good to do 1 or 2 days a week. I don't know. I had a horrible taste in my mouth.
But isn't that just carb cycling?
It is, yeah. That at that point, it's basically carb cycling.
I mean, except for the shit protein source.
Yeah, there's no protein. You basically take collagen protein because you have to avoid isoleucine.
Yeah,
because isoleucine suppresses fibroblast growth factor 21, and that's where this metabolic boost comes from. Now, fasting also increases FGF21. So I would make the case that why don't we fast 1 time per week and then get an FGF21 boost 1 day a week, which is something what a lot of people do. I mean, John Meadows advocated the 1 day fast. I've done 1 day fast, sometimes. I think Roman Fritz fasts 1 day per week. He doesn't struggle with his body fat levels. But I think if you want to upregulate FGF21, either inject it or do it once in a while.
I think the premise was to make your mitochondria more efficient. Obviously, we touched on having a higher carbohydrate diet for mitochondrial efficiency and improving lipolysis. But if we have a natural athlete doing this, then I can see all hell breaking loose. In that, if they are taking modified hormone assistance, their muscle protein breakdown is going to be a lot lower than a non-enhanced person. Their enhanced testosterone levels going to have improved IGF-1. That, I guess this is going to maybe work for those who are in the assisted community, but beyond that, I guess even the different sugar sources. So what's advocated is pretty much sucrose, like straight up sugar, glucose, or a combination of glucose and fructose from honey.
Yeah, about 40-50 glucose and fructose. Yeah, that's pretty much what they recommend.
And then you're hoping that you don't have gut dysbiosis, because now you're feeding a lot of glucose into your gut. And most people's gut health is atrocious. And you're also relying on there being adequate insulin sensitivity, that when that glucose is emptied into the small intestine and absorbed into the body, the pancreas doesn't have a field day, like maybe what you see, where it's so unpredictable that you've got a baseline glucose intake from, I guess, starchy carbohydrate sources, vegetables, like your standard baseline nutrition, and they're just having a free-for-all with simple sugars that one minute your pancreas thinks, okay, it's fairly predictable in what's coming into the body, and now you have either a hyper-insulinogenic response where you produce too much insulin and now your blood sugar completely falls, and now your liver is having to make glucagon to get your glucose level back up again, and now you're trying to restore glycogen within the liver and everything else after that it looks great on paper, but like you said, why not just fast for 4 or 5 days or 72 hours? Like if you're skeptical about 24-hour fasting, go beyond the 24 hours where autophagy and mitophagy, the breakdown of mitochondria, starts occurring.
Yeah, that's about 2 or 3 days. So that's why, it seems that fasting for 2 or 3 days seems to be the most ideal for fat loss, without downregulating your metabolism, without downregulating your thyroid levels, without downregulating your mitochondrial function. And at least with fasting, that's where most of the FGF21 increases occur, day 2 and 3. And then it kind of slows down again, and then protein catabolism picks up. So you get a lot of these free amino acids in the bloodstream converting into gluconeogenesis, and it might suppress FGF21 as well. So this is the reason why they like the sugar fast, because if you exclude particular or a certain amount of protein, especially isoleucine, and exclude direct dietary fats, which you might still get a lot from a little bit of fruit and candy, basically, can have a little bit of fat in there. But if you limit that to below 50 or 30 grams per day, then this FGF21 is just continuously upregulated. Now, the glucose would, of course, be protein sparing, right? Because your mitochondria prefer, the glucose. Is why high carb diets work so well. You can reduce your protein intake to 150 grams per day. I just wonder if you do this for like 21 days straight or 1 week straight, how would it outweigh versus normal fasting regarding your overall body composition? Because I get phenomenal results in body composition from full fasting, and digestive health goes up tremendously because my digestion takes a break, and my pancreas and my gallbladder and my liver, they all kind of relax and detoxify, and the intestinal inflammation goes down. But with this, after 3 days of this fruit diet, from the lack of fiber in the fruit, and then I would eat like, I asked ChatGPT, give me, I have these 10 fruits that I have access to, write me a diet where I combine 5 or 6 fruit sources for about 100 grams of carbs with this much breakdown in glucose and fructose and this much fiber. And then I filled up the rest with a little bit of Manuka honey. So I got about 100, 125 grams of carbs, and then I had 6 meals per day, right? For 600 to 800 grams of carbs and a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat or a little bit of protein and trace amounts of fat from the protein I had at the end of the day for about 2,500 to 3,000 calories. Got a great diet. I got some melon, I got some banana, I got some mango, right? And then a little bit of honey on top. And the first 2 days it went well. And then after that, my blood sugar was all over the place. Holy moly. And that uniquely happened to me. I don't see any anecdotal reports that happens to other people. Some people swear by it, and they continue this for months on end. They're all small, though.
I was going to say, how do you build muscle with a branched chain amino acid missing?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I don't think this is designed for like muscle. I think this is just for pure cellular metabolism.
Yeah.
You like to exist, basically.
These people would do very well with Trevogrumab and Garetosmab to prevent muscle loss while they exclude, essential amino acids.
But like, I mean, the other side of it then is if isoleucine is the main one you're excluding, why aren't they excluding leucine and methionine, which are two other ones? You know, leucine in terms of mTOR, which then is a mechanism that doesn't occur during fasting. Obviously, with fasting, we're boosting AMPK and everything else that feeds off it. That you'd probably make the argument that you just go pretty much no protein, which I think that's what I did see as well, that you basically just rely solely on sugar.
Yeah.
And then this makes your mitochondria super efficient. You've got lipolysis occurring, and then those fatty acids are going in and being oxidized. One thing that I can see occurring potentially is thiamine deficiency. Like vitamin B1 is what feeds into complex 1 to keep NAD turning over and the electrons spinning out from NAD. That how do you get, obviously with fruits you're going to get, some vitamins, minerals, but unless you're taking like a supplement, which there's no rules against, I'm finding it difficult to see with just a strict sugar-based diet.
And I wonder what happens with aldosterone levels, because salt intake is also minimal on this diet.
How do you absorb any fat-soluble vitamins?
True.
So like your vitamin D level goes down to nothing. E, K. So
no fish oil.
You have no short-chain fatty acid production, right? You get a little bit from maybe apples or bananas, perhaps, but not enough, right? Without fiber. Fiber is probably one of the most important things you can eat.
Yeah.
I mean,
what I notice is a lot of when you see the before and after pictures, you see these guys that they get leaner overall, except for their lower back. And I'm not sure if that's water retention from aldosterone changing or some sort of insulinogenic response where, of course, the lower back is very receptive to insulin, right? So obviously insulin levels go up. I didn't check my fasting insulin levels. They're about 2.2, 2.6 on a ketogenic diet. My blood glucose levels never went over 130, but I had periods where it was like 50, 60 in between meals. It was not good. And if you're in ketosis, it's fine, right? Because your brain works on ketones. Different. And if you're, you do fasted cardio and your blood glucose is like 55 and you feel fine because your brain works on ketones. But with this, it really went from 50 to 130, not 150, luckily, right? I'd still have good insulin sensitivity and good insulin release from the pancreas. But yeah, at the last day, I was going hypoglycemic like 3 times per day. It was not fun. I woke up hypoglycemic. I'm like, fuck, man. It's not what I want. And then you start eating a little bit more fuller foods. I had some beef and some rice and some avocado and some whole eggs, just to kind of hold you over with a good amount of vegetables. So you have protein, carbs, and fats together. And then I just kept stuffing myself. So I probably gained a lot of fullness. I felt very full after all this food. Yeah. Should
mean,
have,
even
done
that,
it with Erythritide. Then I could have controlled my appetite a little bit better.
and you would have improved your insulin sensitivity. with even like that approach with waking up with like a hypo, that's probably like insulin dumping coming out of like your sleep. So you've got the dawn effect with your cortisol rising. But now all of a sudden, to try and combat that dawn effect, you just pumped out too much insulin, which then you wake up pretty awful, like looking to consume whatever's in front of you to stave off that low blood sugar.
No, it's not fun. It's not fun. And it could be from glycogenolysis from the liver that, you get the cortisol dump to kind of wake you up, and then you get this blood glucose release, or the release of glucose from the liver, and then you get this hormonal fluctuation in your insulin. And then by the time you actually wake up, you're just full-blown hypoglycemic. And where the fuck am I, It's, it was not fun. So I'm happy to be back on a ketogenic diet. I feel a lot more cognitively sharp. Not impaired anymore. Like day 3, I was fucking brain fogged. And you hear these guys on the, the sugar fasting diet say that they're pretty brain fogged at points, which it sounds counterproductive to productivity. I mean, do you really want to go through all of that where you just feel like some guys have a lot of energy, they need to stop coffee. Other guys just say that they're brain fogged, especially after meals. So I guess it's worthy of a shot, basically, but I think it's pretty extreme. I think it's more extreme than a carnivore diet.
Equal.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both deficient in serious things.
Yeah, it seems that a carnivore diet is a little bit more sustainable, though.
Yeah. It's not sexy, but what if people just ate a balanced diet?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems so crazy, right?
But then we won't have this hype of magic diets that work in tremendous ways.
Yeah, but if you
eat sugar all day and get shredded, isn't that more fun?
Yeah, but are you really going to get more shredded eating nothing but fruit all day? Probably not.
I think the only guys that really get shredded are the ones that also do a lot of exercise on this diet. So you see some cyclists that are fruitarians. Of course, their upper leg is as big as my forearm, if not smaller. They have zero muscle mass. But I do endurance sports, and it seems to work. But besides Chase, who just started this, Chase is basically the biggest guys, and all the other guys that really advocate this, they don't really have that big physique. Mark Bell's pretty jacked, Joe Binley is pretty jacked, but they got there on steroids.
Yeah.
And heavy lifting but the bodybuilder lifestyle or the powerlifting lifestyle, and now they just have to maintain. And again, I would like to see their physiques. Joe Binley has been doing this for a while, but I don't think he's putting on any size. So again, if you're just trying to sustain a nice TRT plus physique, that's very fuckable, then obviously it works. I just wonder the sustainability of it and the long-term benefits. There was one guy, I'll link that podcast down below. There's one guy who went into all of the science of FGF21, and he said it's probably not healthy to sustain this for longer periods of time because it just shows some deleterious effects in the animal models where long-term upregulation of FGF21 causes all kinds of problems. Yeah. I think 1 time a week is okay. I think fasting 1 time per week is also okay. And then you go with what you enjoy the most. Of course, I would enjoy eating fruit all day and then finishing the day off with a kilo of Haribo. Hell yeah. But yeah, fasting is cheaper. This is a lot cheaper. You don't have to do anything for it. You just grab a bottle of water. You don't have to cut any fruit. You don't have to peel shit. Don't have to spend an arm and a leg on Manuka honey. If you're gonna go with honey, you got to go with the best one, right? The antioxidant and the antimicrobial and the fancy pantsy. If you're gonna do a fancy diet, you got to go with the fancy honey, and then you can't go with the cheap candy that you get, the scooping out. You got to go with the high class Haribos, man. The $6 per bag Haribos.
And your $1 million biologics.
$1 million Trevogrumabs.
I mean, I even get questions like with the 5-day fast of, I put up that during the 5-day fast, I'll have our electrolyte plus that has D-ribose in it. And they're like, oh my God, it's a carb. And you're like, well, it's a non-insulinogenic carb or a non-glycemic carb. And then you put up, I have an energy drink. What about the sweetener? And an insulin response. I'm like, all throughout the day, you're having an insulin response. If you didn't, you'd be dead. So try and not
Basal
think too much. You know, asking questions about sweetener in an energy drink causing an insulin response, stopping the beneficial effects of your fast. That in order to keep you alive, your pancreas is continuously balancing your blood sugar with insulin. That if you stopped that, you'd die.
Don't you wish you could do power slap over the internet? Like you charge it and through the screen with the sound effects. Oh man. Yeah.
But it's like you don't mean to be Captain Obvious, but you're like, if you're really worried about the insulin spike of an energy drink, maybe stop breathing. Like that's how nuanced and the arguments are becoming in the industry of, you know, if you have this sweetener, it's going to stop your intestine from having autophagy because of the insulin.
Yeah. No. But it's the guys that question all these silly stuff don't even look good. They're not healthy, right? It's the ones that get stuck in the weeds with all this stuff.
Yeah.
They have 80 other things going on that are wrong, right? But they're focusing on this. They're worried about the energy drink, but nothing else in their life is right. Maybe fix that shit first.
Yeah.
Then worry about the energy drink. Maybe get some sleep and you won't need the energy drink.
So sleep right, do some fasted cardio, eat healthy, eat a balanced diet.
Yeah.
But it's not sexy, man. It doesn't sell. You gotta do the new things, you know. It's consistency community. That's how we should call it. That will be the real name of it. But the drug community sounds better, man. Drug community, yeah. And then people are super worried about these you know, what is it called? The sweeteners. And they go absolutely nuts on that. I mean, I don't really consume sweeteners myself, but I don't think it's an issue unless you really overdo it.
No. I mean, what was that mouse study, Dean? What was the equivalent dose in a human? It was like a dump truck worth of sweetener.
Oh,
the one with the gut microbiome actually showed an improvement in the microbiome from the sweeteners.
Oh, yeah.
People got hung up on the title that it changed your gut microbiome, but if you actually read the study, it improved it.
People ask me these questions all the time about sweeteners, and you look at European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, that do all the health studies to speak or for human safety of certain food ingredients. And of course, everyone's going to have their own opinions on biased research and whatever else. Sucralose, we have to study with rats with the teratogenicity, where it affected DNA in huge dosages.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was the dose?
Or it causes changes to the gut microbiome. So does breathing in a load of polluted air or electromagnetic frequency radiation.
Fruit all day.
You know, so you start to then, like, when people question these things, you're like, there's so many variables here. Aspartame leading to methanol production in the body, which, yes, there is research that suggests perhaps if you're pregnant, you should not be having a lot of aspartame because of the methanol and the toxicity that could have to a baby. But again, that's a very special population. You have monk fruit, which is like, this is another thing that drives me nuts. We don't use any artificial sweeteners in our products, but it has stevia, it has monk fruit. And then you look at the research and they are both gut toxic and change your gut microbiome. That if you really want to be nitpicky, you'd use nothing, because then when you put sugar in a product, what you put sugar in the product for?
Yeah.
What I would like people to do is just to eat healthy 6.5 days a week, cook all of your own meals, and then half a day on Sunday, you don't give a fuck. And you can have your monk fruit and your artificial sweetener and your Ben and Jerry and your pizza. And so just for some normality, right? So you feel like a normal person, and you can, I had my sugar cake in this week, you know? You want to eat some Haribo? Sure. But the rest of the time, just eat a healthy, balanced diet. You know, throw your calories up and down, do your cardio, take the Dr. Dean stack, and shut the fuck up. At least that's affordable, you know?
Yeah. I mean, but people just don't want to do that.
And it's weird, but like we just introduced something new that really, really works for most people, and then they want to go to the next best thing.
Yeah.
Because it didn't outdo the damage they were doing with all the other crap. Right?
You can't get 6% of your quadriceps with Mart.
They're like drinking beer and using SLU. And they're like, well, how come I'm not shredded yet?
Well, this is exactly what I was going to say. you get I get messages all the time of like I've tried what you've trialed, Dean, and I've seen nothing. And you're like, well, if you're seeing nothing, then what question should you be asking yourself?
Did I do what Dr. Dean did?
You know, not even that. Your mitochondria, like you're taking this thing to improve your mitochondrial efficiency. If your mitochondria are already operating like rubbish or crap, you've just made more of them that are working like crap. Like, you know, and they're like, oh, well, I was expecting more out of this. And it's like, this is like the cherry on the cake that once you've got everything optimized, you're going to turbocharge it. It's not that you're coming in to take this and it's going to instantly change the landscape of your metabolism.
No, and not for nothing, lifting weights will downregulate mitochondria, right? And cardio will upregulate it. So why don't people start there? Like balance the two of those things out first before taking a drug to try to make more for no reason when they're not doing any of the basic things.
You know what increases MOTS levels?
What's that?
Exercise.
Yeah.
Look at that.
And then high intensity cardio causes mitochondrial migration. So like people don't realize this as well, like your mitochondria move around your body. They do not stay in the same cell. Like if your body, so if you have a heart attack and your heart now requires a lot of energy, what happens? All your mitochondria go towards the heart to try and keep that alive with ATP. So depending on if you do high intensity interval training cardio, you upregulate the mitochondria in the muscle cells of your leg or within obviously your aerobic system. So looking at these like not fancy things, like telling someone go and kill yourself on a 15-second Wingate sprint, you know, 5 or 6 times and do that 4 times per week on top of your lifting. It's not as sexy as, take 400 micrograms SLU and your mitochondria massively increase in number.
You know, it's funny. If you do that for a month, the Wingate sprints or the high intensity cardio or just training balls to the wall, and then you add this stuff in, then you notice a fucking difference. Because
you start with fitness first.
Like I remember, like ubiquinol, I introduced it a couple of years ago. Like just take a little bit of ubiquinol pre-workout. Yeah, but it's an antioxidant. It will lower your anabolic response. Okay, shut the fuck up, you little midget piece of shit. But people that train fucking insane, they're like, holy shit, this is such a difference. But you need to train insane first before you notice a difference. Before you notice this mitochondrial upregulation and the electron transport chain improving and, you know, the respiration improving. And so a lot of people might complain about new things that we introduce that doesn't do anything, but the foundation needs to be there first. And again, this is the anabolic roundtable. So if you're not anabolic, you're not doing the things that you need to do to be anabolic, like training hard and taking a little bit of TRT and then some and eating a lot of protein, then yeah, what's the point? What's the point of myoinositol tripyrophosphate when you have no muscle to oxygenate? Yeah, rant over. So, Kurt, would you like to try the fruit fasting diet?
No, thanks. I think I'm good. I think I've got the diet. I've got the diet thing down pat. I think you got it locked down.
I'm
good. I'm good with it.
Dean, are you going to change your pre-contest or pre-holiday stack to include more fruits?
Plenty more anabolic fruit.
Yeah, anabolic, more pineapples and bananas and apples. The hard apples, not the full ones.
The whole setup, obviously, of what we're doing now at the moment is to try and keep here as safe as possible. So pineapple for me with the low estrogen is no longer a delicacy I can enjoy. So we have to do things a little more intelligently. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to be changing my diet to be eating Haribos and fruits and excessive sugars just to increase my FGF21 when I do 72 to 5-day fasts, you know, a couple of times a year.
I think what I'm going to do next time is, when I get sick of the ketogenic diet, I'm just going to schedule one Sunday to eat like this, like a sugar fasting diet, right? Just fruits and honey and candy. And then I'll make it in the context of upregulating my FGF21 and fat loss, when in reality, I just want to eat candy. Right? It's like all those guys that, like, I'm not trying to shit on the diet, but people go on TRT, I need to increase my, this and that. It's just say you want to use steroids, man. Just say you want to eat candy. It's fine. Just call it for what it is.
Cheat meal rebranded.
Yeah. And it's people have been doing this for a long time. You guys know about skip loading, right? It's also very high carbs.
Yeah.
And that's been around for decades. And the guy would just customize, like Ken Skip Hill would customize your skip load week by week, starting with a 4-hour eating window to 6 hours to 8 hours to 12 hours, and then design the entire carb loading protocol around that, about the foods that worked for you. And every skip load looked different. So I think this is just very nuanced skip loading with fruits. And if it works, it works. Great. I don't think it will work for anybody. I don't think it's very sustainable. But if you want to do it for a week or two, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead. I really wonder what happens with Chase after about 2 weeks. He's pretty in tune with his body. This is blood work. And he's probably the biggest dude who's ever tried this.
Yeah. What's his cycle? What is he on while he's doing this?
Test and Retatrutide probably, and GH. And MOTC and SLU.
Are we counting GLPs as part of a cycle now?
It's a compound.
I don't know.
We're
It's
into
like
an
half
era.
a milligram GLP Retatrutide Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I think
Well, see,
that's what
here's
he's
another
doing.
one. We talked about dietary fiber. So short chain fatty acids produce GLP-1. So perhaps if more people ate a balanced diet, they wouldn't need the GLP drug. Just saying.
Well, that's it. Propionate is what improves your GLP secretion.
Yeah, but that's too simple, right? Eat right.
Does it? Oh, maybe that's why the testosterone propionate is working so well right now.
A little different.
Yeah, it's a little different. Oh, you mean the propionate?
Yeah.
The fatty ester.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hilarious.
Not that testosterone doesn't work.
It does work. I mean, we're still pretty saucy. It's not bad. 235 pounds, baby.
It's all that fruit.
Yeah, it's all that fruit that is still stuck in there. And I really would wonder what happens to people's liver with all this fructose coming in.
It's got to be fantastic for you.
And the funny thing is, like, a carnivore diet is also a great way to get non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Aren't the same guys that are preaching this? Aren't they the ones that were just doing the carnivore diet?
So Mark Bell got great results on a carnivore diet, but of course, like, if you follow a strict carnivore diet with the carbohydrate refeeds, then you get some mitochondrial dysfunction as well, and it's the free from fatty acids that eventually ruin your insulin sensitivity. So of course you can mitigate that with injectable carnitine to kind of clean up the free from fatty acids and then the triglycerides and stuff, and the cardio and exercise. So again, how much, the scientific evidence says that you create insulin resistance by going on a carnivore diet or ketogenic diet, but that's not in the context of exercise.
No. And I was going to say, we're taught the opposite. The high fat diet can destroy insulin sensitivity.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Yeah, it causes insulin resistance. It causes insulin resistance. Yeah, and I noticed that myself as well. If I don't, do the cardio and training, that if I just follow a ketogenic diet, I actually lose insulin sensitivity and I get flatter and softer, especially in the legs.
Contraction is what's causing the GLUT4 translocation.
Exactly. Yeah. So I need to keep doing that on this ketogenic diet, but I also know that I need a little bit of glucose uptake post workout. To keep those GLUT4 activators going, keep the metabolic process going. So I have about 50 to 80 grams of carbs post-workout. And then, whatever the fuck I want on Sunday. Because on Sunday, it's, if I want to eat a pastrami sandwich with fat, saturated fat, full with it, and then some high fructose corn syrup from ketchup, of course I'm going to go for it, man. I got a life.
When it's
I got a wife, I got a life, I got to eat.
Yeah, all these things in moderation still are okay.
Yeah, once a week, it's totally fine, man. It's totally fine. So, I'm not against people trying it. I just wonder what the long-term things is. But then again, the long-term with a ketogenic diet and the long-term with a carnivore diet or a vegan diet, that's all kind of deleterious.
There won't be a long-term because they'll try the next diet that comes out in 2 weeks from now.
Oh, right. Should we just come up with the anabolic roundtable diet?
Why don't we do our own diet?
Yeah. It was so boring.
Yeah, I don't think no one's going to prescribe to our healthy eating standards.
What about
2 eggs?
What about the French fry diet?
French
People
fry
do that. But you can only have 2 fries a day. That's your entire diet. Right? There's no isoleucine either, so you'll upregulate all these other fiber.
Yeah,
all that shit.
yeah. You remember the potato diet? Potato only diet was very popular in the 50s and 60s. People lost crazy weight on that as well.
Well, ask Dean. I mean, in Ireland, that's and sure enough, you don't see a whole lot of fat people in Ireland. Right?
Open my front door and shout over to the neighbor in the next house in the field.
Fuck, man. Like in Vietnam during the war, they ate taro, which is, and that's all they ate, and that has even less nutritional value. This is just all they had during the war.
I can't remember, was it Cosmopolitan magazine or one of these women's magazines where there was the wine diet where they're allowed to drink 2 glasses of white wine per day with insane fat loss results.
Wow. It's not even got resveratrol in it. Dean, you asked ChatGPT some very interesting questions about relative binding affinity and androgen receptor mediated gene transcription. You come up with some great results. Please spill the beans, because it was very interesting when you wrote it out in the group chat. But I think everybody should get a chance to listen to this. So take it away.
Yeah, so obviously we have Team Primo, Team Masteron. Well, I mean, to be on one team or the other, you're missing the whole point of choosing one or the other.
Yeah.
But when I asked it...
Sorry, is there a Team Masteron? Really?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to have one that favors one compound over the other, I think. No one really seems to want to use both.
Favors Masteron, but
I can think of 3.
Oh, 3. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Instead of using them both,
so
perhaps.
it's a large percent of the population.
You can use both, but Primo needs to be the foundation.
Yeah.
So I asked it based on all the published research. So I had to do a PubMed crawl on Masteron. And one of the craziest things, obviously, with ChatGPT is that it crawls everywhere. So even if you tell it, I want you to crawl PubMed, it will go and crawl everywhere. So obviously online, when we ask for the relative binding affinity of Masteron, it returns that it's 5 times testosterone.
But we don't know the relative binding affinity.
Absolutely, because it's on Wikipedia 5 times. So it pulls it from Wikipedia. And then I questioned it. I said, well, that's not correct. Can you do a search again? And then it came back and said, oh, we do not know the binding affinity, but it is purported to be 5 times testosterone. Okay, that's fair enough. I asked it some questions on uses that Masteron's been done. So obviously we have all the breast cancer research in women. And then I asked it to explain to me the mechanisms of how it interferes with estrogen positive breast cancer. And then it starts to really show you how perhaps it interferes with estrogen metabolism. So we start looking at the androgen response element when we activate that. So people always focus on you've got your androgen receptor, the two of them bind together. It's what happens after that binding that's important, as opposed to the affinity for the receptor itself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the androgen response element is then what tells your genome, this is what I want you to do. But activating the androgen response element can tune down the estrogen response element, which obviously then will down-regulate how the estrogen receptor is expressed or functions. So when we're viewing perhaps Masteron having anti-estrogen effects, we're perhaps interfering with the estrogen response elements as opposed to directly at estradiol from aromatase. The other thing that I questioned it was, well, here's Primobolan structure and here's Masteron structure. Which one do you think is more anabolic? And it came back with, surprisingly, based on the body of research, Masteron is more anabolic. And it started to explain that Masteron is a more flexible molecule. So obviously from this perspective, it made the assumption that the ligand binding domain of the androgen receptor would be more accommodating for this more flexible molecule going into it. And prior to all this, I had given it all the research on the ligand binding domain, the N-terminal, and the DNA binding domain. So I give it all the research known on what modulates the androgen receptor to make its decision from. And then following that, I said, well, if anecdotally Primobolan is more anabolic than Masteron in males, what do you think would be the proposed mechanism of how it does that? And its first iteration back was, well, one would assume Masteron is more anabolic because it is more flexible, having a better androgen binding affinity. But if anecdotally Primobolan is more anecdotal, here's the reasons why. And so one of the suggestions was that C1, C2 double bond makes the A ring more planar, more flat. And now for that to dock into the ligand binding domain requires less entropy. So there's less chance of chaos interfering.
So it's in there longer.
It's in there longer, and it's also more, even though the affinity for the ligand binding domain is lower, if that is true, versus Masteron, because it is less flexible, because of that flat planar bond and also resonance from C1, C2 double bond into C3's carbon-oxygen double bond, you're making that oxygen on C3 more electron donating or better at creating a hydrogen bond, which is what drives that interaction in the ligand binding domain as well. So it was able to say perhaps that flat structure reduces the entropy, or the complex that the molecule forms with the androgen receptor is a more favorable shape to dock into the androgen response element to turn on genes associated with anabolism. So now you're going beyond, oh, well, this structure fits the androgen receptor better. It's now more so when it goes into the nucleus to the gene response elements that Primobolan's androgen receptor complex is a better shape for turning on muscle protein synthesis.
Right.
And then you're heading into the path of SARMs, or like Trembolone being a, in theory, selective androgen receptor modulator from a muscle building perspective, because of that flat planar shape of TREN being able to dock into these elements of the genome to turn on muscle protein synthesis or nitrogen retention, whatever pathway we want to play from, and then interfere perhaps with the estrogen response elements that interferes how your estrogen perhaps binds to the estrogen receptor or how you produce estrogen receptors themselves.
So you were mentioning that the androgen receptor and estrogen receptors use the same cofactors for gene transcription. And then if you really bind the androgen receptor tightly with these cofactors are no longer available for the estrogen receptor. So this is where the estrogen-mediated gene transcription becomes inhibited because it simply doesn't function correctly. And this has been proven for testosterone in various breast cancer studies, where the testosterone uses these cofactors and now are no longer available for the estrogen receptor.
And vice versa. Xenoestrogens will block the androgen receptor.
Block the androgen receptor, right. So that means that, of course, Primobolan and Masteron are, similar to testosterone. So it would make sense that something like that could happen for these kinds of compounds.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because it was really trying to make the assumption that Masteron being more flexible should in theory have a higher binding affinity for the androgen receptor. But I think now moving forward, and some of the research we were discussing about stereoisomers, where you change the conformation or the 3D structure of the protein or the androgen in space, will change the structure of the androgen to androgen receptor complex as a protein, change its 3D structural shape. So now it's able to dock into different sections along the genome better. So if we're able to create steroids with different stereo centers, so a stereoisomer is basically you have a carbon, and then off that carbon you share either one part sticking up, one part sticking down. You'll have different substituents playing off that carbon, so it doesn't have the same substituent off any position. You can then change those stereocenters to change the conformation of the molecule in space.
Right.
So that was the research that you shared, that you then start heading down the pathway of potentially creating muscle-specific anabolic steroids with better anabolism and avoiding some of the side effects that can come from classic anabolic steroids.
Yeah, because how many polymorphisms are there for the androgen receptor? 60, 70?
I thought over 1,000.
Really?
There's over 1,000 known polymorphisms that I'm aware of.
Okay. So yeah, if that can all be indexed and then use AI to design a compound to only interact with the ones on the skeletal muscle. Yeah. No, but it does make a lot of sense that slowly, piecing the scientific evidence together that again, we're ultimately after the response on the DNA.
Yeah.
Not how the relative binding affinity is just an interesting number.
Yeah.
Or the anabolic to androgen.
Like Nandrolone binds more firmly than testosterone, but is what's occurring in the nucleus any better than testosterone? I would say
exactly. No. Yeah.
It's irrelevant.
And of course, if you're using testosterone and nandrolone together, the testosterone has a certain domain where it binds to. Mm-hmm. And that might overlap with the nandrolone, but nandrolone might overlap with other domains that testosterone doesn't overlap or bind to. And then the synergy between these two compounds. And then it's about finding your individual cocktail so you can get the best of both domains in individual ratio regarding protein expression that works for you. And that's why some guys like low test, high primo, and vice versa. High test, a little bit of primo or a little bit of trin to get this favorable protein expression for them. Because again, the protein metabolism downstream is going to be different for everybody as well. And that might take a while to figure out. Now, maybe with a DNA test, you can figure it out more. With the GAC repeat test that Merrick Health offers, you can figure it out more.
They just sent me one.
Oh, really? So you're going to do it? Okay, perfect.
It just came today.
Cool, perfect. Let us know what your results are. I'm still trying to figure out a way to get it here. Unfortunately. Okay. Yeah, it's sending the shit to Thailand is a nightmare, man.
I mean, even covering from that, if we can do genome sequencing or like an isotope tracer into like an isotope traced steroid, you could try and track the genes that are switched on from Primobolan, the genes that are switched on with Masteron. I think one of the other things that it suggested was you could do an assay to profile those co-activators between the two. So again, we're seeing what co-activators are being expressed or initiated from Primobolan or Masteron. But I think moving forward, there might be, some more questions to ask beyond just the androgen receptor and going more so into the DNA. Mm-hmm. And even then, someone's DNA, depending on their chromatin structure or the histone and the acetylation of the histones, certain people's genetic responses from a DNA perspective could be completely different, which again adds why someone might say, oh, Masteron gave me more anabolism than Primobolan. The shape of how their chromatin has been wound together, if you want to put it that way, with histones and acetylation, you might not be able to dock correctly in with something like Primobolan versus Masteron. So I think there's a lot more complex questions to be asked that, yeah, anecdotally, we all have observed Primobolan being the more potent of the two. But then the other hypothesis that ChatGPT even came up with was, well, Primobolan probably lowers SHBG a lot lower than Masteron. So now your testosterone is staying more free, which now you're enhancing your ability of your own, I'm not going to say your own, your testosterone base that you're using to work more effectively in the cycle, which again will have a known effect on your gene transcription.
Yeah, and then it converts to estradiol and DHT, which might have some overlapping effect regarding your, DNA transcription. DHT is said to be not very anabolic, but I'm sure in combination with real anabolics, it elicits some sort of additional response. That's why some people swear by injectable DHT, right? I know some of them reached out to you guys as well. You want to buy some DHT annotate, bro? So I think in the end, it just depends on individual response, and you have to try what works for you. And you don't have to be all exclusive. Like for me, Masteron is purely a cosmetic enhancing drug. It doesn't really do much anabolism-wise, unless I really go to 2,000 milligrams a week, which I have no intention to do. That's fucking 10 milliliters per week. I'd rather run 10 milliliters of Primo at 100 milligrams per mil. And it's probably cheaper also than 200 milligrams per ml of Masteron annotate. And then you also got to think about the molecular difference, because if you compare methanolone annotate versus drostanolone annotate, with methanolone you get more molecules. Mm-hmm. If you both do 100 milligrams per milliliter. So these things also got to factor in. What is it, 10% difference in molecules?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's huge. It was like 60 trillion billion or something.
Yeah.
We looked at it that, even on the surface, this was, someone said to me before about 2.5 milligrams of Anavar for a woman. And it's like, again, it's in the trillion billion molecule number. And you're like, 2.5 milligram looks like a small number weight wise.
But it's when you look at the molecular zeros, weight, baby.
Yeah. You look at how many molecules it is. How confident would you be taking that many molecules of cyanide into your body? It's only 2 milligrams of cyanide, man. Like, the weight has got nothing to do with the number. You take a higher weight because it has more molecules.
2 milligrams of Clen.
It's 2 milligrams of Clen. Good luck.
It's 20 micrograms already too much. Jesus Christ.
Like, I think when we're looking at even that comparison between the number of molecules in a standard dose, that's even where it becomes complex. Of like, someone's trying to compare 100 milligrams of Primo to 100 milligrams of Masteron. Primo has already trillion billion more molecules that you can't, unless you want to work out exactly how many molecules would be in an equivalent dose between the two and then try and run that as an experiment. Primo has much more favoritism towards having a genomic effect because of the sky-high number of molecules it has on Masteron.
Yeah, it's a close to 10% difference, I think. If you inject 100 milligrams versus 100 milligrams, it might be a 5 to 10% difference in molecules. I did a video about this, you discount for the ester, and then even if the concentration is the same, so everything is 100 milligrams per 1 milliliter, if you discount for the ester and then the molecular weight, there's a discrepancy of like 20% between the different steroid molecules. Between testosterone propionate and trenbolone acetate, something like that. And that's what a lot of people forget. If you boil it down to molecule for molecule, there's a huge range, even if you account for the same amount of milligrams.
And I mean, even like that analysis with ChatGPT, I asked it like molecule per molecule. I didn't say, here's 100 milligrams of Primo, here's 100 milligrams of Masteron. I asked, of the two of these, if I had a molecule, which one is creating more favorable anabolism?
Do they ever investigate the residency time in the anabolic, the androgen receptors?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
In terms of the time, I guess when you look at the kinetics of what happens, it's very, very quick. Like androgen binds into the androgen binding domain, the ligand binding domain, and then the chaperone heat shock proteins dissociate and it's shuttled into the nucleus.
Yep.
Once it's in the nucleus, I think it's pretty much straight away it finds what it needs to do and starts gene transcription.
But how long is that gene transcription process? Is that once, or is that multiple times?
For each element, it should be just once.
Once. So one receptor complex docking in and triggering off like translation of a protein or transcription and translation.
And then the androgen is kicked off the androgen receptor?
Correct. Okay. So the two will dissociate and it basically leaves and goes off to be metabolized.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be metabolized by a 3-alpha hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase or another. It could technically leave the nucleus, go back to an androgen receptor. Right.
rebind. Yeah. There's nothing to say that it only gets one go. It'll create a ligand complex, go into the nucleus, create an effect, dissociate, and then, like you said, if it doesn't leave, if it doesn't leave the cell into the bloodstream and arrives at the liver, it could in theory create another interaction and go back into the nucleus.
So let's say you have a Primobolan in the picture that's producing all these beautiful proteins for anabolism, and you have Masteron in the picture occupying the 3-alpha hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, preventing Primobolan from being metabolized, allowing it to rebind to another androgen receptor.
So now you've got a synergy of two. Like there's, it's not straightforward when you look at it this way. There's so many what ifs that all this theoretical questions, you shouldn't just discount that one's better than the other. Although we do have the anecdotal evidence that for some, Primobolan will crash to estrogen, which might come from this estrogen response element part. Yeah. And then Masteron, in my view, being more flexible, can go into the gatekeeper of aromatase, like we've seen before, and block the aromatase binding site from testosterone entering. So you lower your estradiol from that blocking of the aromatase gatekeeper. So, but then when you look at blood work, certain people end up with crashed estrogen with Masteron, and others end up with crashed estrogen with Primobolan. It's not straight up that.
No, it's not straight up.
They both do it, and it's now you're starting to make it a bit more complex with this androgen response element interfering with the estrogen response elements.
Yeah, and I think we were one of the first people to actually report this 5, 6, 7 years ago. That because we would always ask our people to do blood work, right? So you could see, you're on a TRT, you add in some Primo, estrogen goes down. And then you see that happen in 99 out of 100 people or 95 out of 100 people, and you draw the conclusion, hey, maybe this acts as an aromatase inhibitor. And then Kurt finds you a study, said, hey, look at this study where they do biotransformation on Primobolan, and there's actually 2 metabolites that prove it. And will those be produced in the human body? We're not really sure, but at least there's some scientific evidence that it's shown. And for Masteron, there's no scientific evidence besides the blood work. So there's anecdotal evidence, and there's plenty of people that it happens to, but not to everybody.
The estrogen positive breast cancer, where that you're giving the androgen to the woman because of it interferes with the estrogen receptor expression.
Right.
So, I mean, it's 2 separate things again.
Three actually, because you have the estrogen receptor being expressed less, estrogen levels might go down, and then these cofactors that contribute to estrogen-mediated gene transcription. So you have 3 steps. And then you might have a deleterious 4th step where Masteron inhibits the sexual binding globulin, allowing testosterone to convert to estradiol more. But you don't see. Estradiol levels don't go up when you add in the Masteron.
Nope.
Unless the Masteron is testosterone.
I was going to say, unless the Masteron's on Masteron. I would wonder if when you see estrogen go down from Masteron, if that's not Masteron either.
So it could be one of the metabolites, or
who knows?
It's so hard, right? Because you see clear changes on blood work, and then you have to kind of pinpoint what's going on with scientific evidence that hasn't been updated in 40 years. Our relative binding affinities have been established for most of these compounds. And if they have been established, studies from like 1978 or using computer models. So that's, or in vitro. Okay, that's great. But is it humans? No. So it's sometimes very frustrating and difficult to kind of piece it together. But an individual response is kind of key here. And for that, you got to experiment a little bit. And try both, see which one you like. I'm not against whatever works for you, but
I think based on what I told it, what was funny is I didn't argue back when I said to it, well, if Primobolan is anecdotally more anabolic, why? And then it started to think, okay, well, here's the certain mechanisms that could play into it. I mean, it's a pity if we had someone that could do computational models of showing docking into that ligand binding domain, because we have these crystal structures. It's relatively straightforward computational chemistry, but if anyone here is in the comments and has access to.
Oh, there are people who are into the shit. Trust me, there's people watching
things like Reaxis. If I had access to stuff like this back in a academic environment, I'd no doubt be trying to satisfy some curiosity.
No, but there are high-level people watching this podcast that might be able to do that stuff. So they'll probably reach out to me after, or you, or Kurt after this podcast. I'm sure you guys had it like last month also. Like, hey, what about this? You know, where people just start to send you like a life story of, you know, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? It happens, man. There's a lot of high-level people watching this podcast now. So it wouldn't surprise me if somebody reaches out that has access to computational modeling and then can run those things on some sort of special software that they have or a special computer system. It wouldn't surprise me at all. You just got to feed them the information if you have time for it. But yeah, very, very interesting. And we don't come any closer to the answer.
No. And that is why I guess, you know, we're never going to have bull opinions of, like, you're either on the team or off the team. It's, we think one works better than the other, but it's not saying the other doesn't work at all. It's just in our tier list, one just anecdotally performs way better. So why change? You know,
why change
the record?
And it doesn't, like, you know, if you like blacks or blondes, brunettes or blondes, you can have both unless you get into a relationship, or you can have two at the same time. It's not unheard of either. I mean, Paul Burnett got his pro card on test Primo and Masteron, and he looked absolutely fantastic. And maybe some Winstrol at the end.
Winstrol too.
Yeah, Winstrol too. Yeah.
But I mean, there's the difference between my 22 prep and 2024 last year. Last year I didn't use Masteron. There's no difference in my view of how I looked 2 years before that versus last year.
Maybe that's why you're so full and not flat.
Yeah, well.
Shots fired. They should add it in this time. Let's see if you get skinny on the beach, you know?
Yeah, we do a reverse experiment and all my hair falls out because...
True. Yeah, you got to think about that.
For me...
But wait a minute, I thought Masteron was hair safe. What are you talking about, man? In the as a very cliff note, sponsored by Syntex, there were no virilizing side effects observed in these females with zero estrogen.
None. Yeah.
None. Zero. No hair loss. Hair safe. Totally.
Considering estrogen is very important for your hair, which is probably one of the mechanisms why my hair fell out on top of genetic androgenic alopecia. You crash your estrogen, good luck. Your hair is going to fall out. Simple as that.
That's why I let your estrogen run rampant.
Until I start crying watching TV
shows. Yeah. So you can actually identify what it is to be a woman and start loving, the Me Too, Disney, the MCU movies. Oh man. Yeah, so that was a very interesting topic that you brought up on the group chat. So thanks for sharing. I just wish we could get closer to the answer. But again, I think self-experimentation is just key. And you try a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and see what sticks. Like for me, testing Primo with a little bit of Masteron is fine. Other guys like low test, high Masteron, and maybe a little bit of Primo if they can afford it. But man, the prices of Primo and Masteron have shot up. Holy shit. Yeah, holy shit. It's back now. The producers are producing. Steve, I ordered 700 kilos of Primo. It's going to be back in stock soon.
It is 700 kilos.
Yeah, 700 kilos. That's how much they ordered. I'm like, holy shit. And then you look at the price list and you're like, Jesus Christ, the prices have gone up tremendously. So at least it's a price. They're picking up the supply again. So the dryness is soon to end. The steroid drought. But prices are... I know, but the dollar is not worth much anymore. I hate to say it. It's, DXY is coming down from 117 to 99. So maybe that's why the prices are going up. Because the value of the dollar is going down. Start printing, man. Start printing, Kurt. Start printing those dollars. What else do we want to discuss for this podcast? I had we can discuss Poloxamer real quick.
Sure.
We had a little bit of a boo-boo last week, our last podcast where we went for Boloxone.
That's my fault.
Yeah, that's okay. It happens. I said bromostanolone for a very long time instead of dromostanolone for drostanolone. So sometimes you get a boo-boo in your brain and then it sticks. And you're like, why can't I find it? But it's Poloxamer 88. Now, let me see, where was that?
And so that I did find Boloxane 188 in certain places. But
Okay.
it was patents where you went into the patent and it just sort of ended in a dead end. And I was around using these polymers to stabilize growth hormone complexes.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it was like we discussed, there's just no search of it other than what we seen on that thread of ingredients for growth hormone subtypes, one of them having Boloxane.
Mm-hmm.
I tried looking at polymer manufacturers who would make Poloxamer 188 to see would they make Boloxane or Boloxamer as well, and couldn't find anything.
So you found the Poloxamer 88, and you also sent me a link. I can share that on the screen.
See if I can find.
Of the growth hormones that contain that kind of stuff. So genotropin, you can see here what it contains, the excipients, and it actually varies per formulation. Now, genotropin is no longer really available, right? Apparently that's discontinued and replaced for Ngenla, the somatrogen Gela with the HCG subunit. But then here you see an omnitrope in the 2.8 or the 5.8 milligrams per vial. It contains a couple excipients, but then the 5 milligram pen cartridge, it contains Poloxamer 188. So it even varies between their different formulations. So in the vials, it's not contained of omnitrope, but in the pen cartridge, it is contained. And let's see, Humatrope doesn't have Poloxamer 188. Neutropin doesn't have it. Sison doesn't have it. Sison being one of the best, obviously. And then Norditropin does have it. 188.
Yeah, and Serostim doesn't either, but it's not listed.
No, it's not listed here. Yeah. So Sison and Serostim, if you want to avoid the Poloxamer 188, actually it does contain it here. Sison also contains it in the 6 milligram formulation, the 12 milligram formulation, and the 20 milligram formulation cartridges. So it seems that the Poloxamer 188 is mostly found in the cartridges. Right? This is a Norditropin cartridge, Poloxamer 188. Sison cartridges, 188. Maybe that has to do with some of the plastics that the cartridges comes in.
Genotropin, I don't know, it smells like plastic.
Yeah, but they don't have it.
Oh, good point.
Yeah, they don't have it.
I thought it was weird that the genotropin smelled like plastic, though.
It smells like hospital, legitimately.
Yeah, like insulin.
Oh, yeah,
true.
Same. So that's pretty interesting that several of these different growth hormone formulations, again, it's linked down below, guys, in case you want to read it, that use different excipients. And maybe based on the excipients, I think that's worthy of a deep dive. I'll make a video about it at one point. Based on excipients, we might be able to select the best brand of growth hormone, because all growth hormone is 191 amino acids. But we clearly notice different results between different growth hormone formulations. And I think, Kurt, you sent me something about the UGL, the generics, right, from China, that one of them contains Poloxamer 188. We can't mention the name anymore, otherwise it goes out of stock. So, Dean, you found that Poloxamer 188 might cause some kidney damage.
Yeah,
there's a PubMed article on it. It depends on which Poloxamer 188. I guess there's different grades.
Yeah, there's a P and an NT.
S or something, or an S, I thought. Oh, P. You're right. P188-P.
Yeah, and an NT, I think. And the P was more deleterious for your kidneys. Now, we're talking about milligrams upon milligrams being administered in an animal model. And then unfortunately here in the excipients, they don't really mention how much poloxamer is contained within a cartridge of omnitrope or norditropin.
I've seen it in clients. Again, we don't know the amount, right? But in the dose, when the dose went above, in some of the generics, above 6 IUs, the creatinine level started to rise. And then when they brought it back down, it went within weeks, went right back down.
And you saw that in an animal model as well, where creatinine shot up at like 10 milligrams poloxamer, 188p. Now, is that transient, temporary?
I'm not going to take the risk on someone's kidneys with it to try to figure that out.
Well, you saw clear histological. Fuck, do you pronounce it? Where they histological, right? Where they take an image of the kidney tissue and you see clear, nephrotic tissue or changes to the nephrons, and I would consider that to be permanent.
Yeah, well, the NF is more toxic than the P.
Oh, the NF. Okay.
Renal dysfunction observed in clinical studies of P188-NF is not observed in clinical studies of P188-P. So I'm guessing the Chinese companies are probably using the NF because it's cheaper. Or I would guess it's cheaper. They don't care.
Wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, and we don't see that in the table 13 of, that PubMed article, or what is it called? The books from the National Library of Medicine. We don't really see the difference. I'm sure we could figure that out.
I think
then see which pharmaceutical growth hormone is the most kidney toxic. That would be a fucking good video, I think.
I think what I sent originally when I looked into pharmaceutically why poloxamer 188 is chosen is because of it is a surfactant. So basically it just makes it more stable in solution once it's reconstituted. And that's probably why, again, the cartridges tend to be reconstituted cartridges you load into the pen. If we think about it, poloxamer 188, from what I remember reading into it, it's 188 for a reason. That's how many polymers are within it. And obviously it's a huge, if you want to put it bluntly, a huge plastic chain, if you wanted to say it that way. Like a polymer tends to be a term used towards plastics, which are just carbon-based molecules anyway. Now your kidneys have to filter that out. If it goes into your bloodstream and, passes through the liver and passes through the kidneys, your kidneys will either be able to filter it or they won't. And if they can't filter it, it'll get forced through and cause some damage on the way past. So I guess it is probably the concentration of the poloxamer within the product that, like when you look at peptide manufacturing, and Kurt talked about this before as well, certain manufacturers will bulk up a peptide product with mannitol.
Yeah.
Like it has to have an excipient. If you've got a vial of 5 milligrams BPC 157, do you think that whole white puck inside that vial is 5 milligrams of BPC? It's had to be suspended in solution with mannitol and other excipients, and then it's freeze-dried.
Right.
And then you're left with a puck of powder that you can actually visibly see and dilute and make soluble. That it's probably the amount that's in it. And if you have, Chinese manufacturers that are looking for quick ways to make a more stable product, they're going to add more poloxamer to the product to make it more stable in solution so it doesn't rapidly break down. If someone suspends it, puts it in the fridge, it'll have a shelf life in the fridge of 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And I would say where I see the difference between the pharma and the UGL stuff is not necessarily at the lower doses, right? 'Cause it's kind of hard to tell what's even occurring at the lower doses. But as the dose goes up and up and up, the pharma keeps going, right, in its effectiveness, where the UGL seems to flatten and almost go the opposite direction. Like when Chase and I both used whole bottles of that reputable underground lab, we had the opposite effect that Serostim has. Our weight start to drop, like your muscles start to get flat and stringy, probably from too much mannitol and things like that. But the effects are totally different, right? Whereas like on a lower dose, you could probably justify using it, for some level of fat loss or something. But when it comes to using a dose for hyperplasia, it's just not occurring with the
And funnily enough, if you do serum tests in UGL or pharma, it almost comes back similarly now. and with the potency being 98 to 99.7% between UGL and pharma, it's pretty comparable. So I have generics here or UGLs that give me 34, 36 nanograms per milliliter after a 10 IU shot in the shoulder, 2.5 hours before drawing blood, which is comparable, very similar to what I would get for pharmaceutical grades. But I think the binders and excipients give you some sort of altered response.
Yeah, I was going to say, just because it's showing the blood doesn't mean it's doing the same thing. It's like the
no, exactly.
Receptor. Just because it binds to the androgen receptor doesn't mean anything's occurring at the nucleus.
No.
And you see that time and time again. Not that there's no place for the UGL stuff. I think there is, right? There's supply issues of pharma, there's major cost issues with pharma stuff. And for most guys, they just don't need to run that huge of a dose of GH. So
no, 4 to 5 IUs is kind of where most people.
What does it really matter?
Yeah.
But when the guys start to creep it up, I think that's when both you see the health issues go, and you see lack of results. Right? Like if the guy's using 10 IUs of UGL growth and he doesn't look pretty crazy, GH is junk. I don't care what the serum test shows, because at that dose, you should look noticeably different day after day.
You should look full as a house 24/7.
And when your pants should be falling off you.
Yeah, true.
I guess I seen in the comments on the last one we were asked about, like, speaking about sub-Q and IM growth hormone.
Do you want me to?
And obviously the serum level, and when we look at the studies of 10 IU IM versus 10 IU sub-Q, what I interjected with as a comment was, when you get a peak plasma level of a drug, the drug's residency time, so you get a big massive spike and the drug residency time is only 3 hours. Yes, you've got a super physiological serum level. If you do it sub-Q, you have a smaller peak level with a prolonged residency time of 10 hours. When you compare the two, as in the area under the curve, which is the amount of space underneath that peak, they're roughly the same between a sub-Q and an IM shot. That IM gets in and gets out. But the other thing that you have to consider is a plasma level is how much of the drug is in your bloodstream, not inside your cells. So the amount that's inside your bloodstream that can interact with a growth hormone receptor. What's more important is the IGF-1 outcome.
Yes.
And again, when you compare the two, the IM versus sub-Q IGF response, whilst one is an immediate super physiological increase, overall IGF-1 conversion levels are pretty much the same between sub-Q and IM, other than sub-Q has a more balanced circadian output. So if you want to, no doubt, if you want to have super physiological levels of growth hormone all throughout the day without relying on circadian pattern, you could do IM shots of growth hormone every 3 or 4 hours. Get a big spike, but who's going to who's going to IM shot 8 to 10 IUs of growth hormone every 4 hours of the day?
Well, can I give you 3 reasons why that doesn't make sense? So 1, you don't want to be multi-dosing it, right? Because then you're going to become insulin resistant. That's why every pharmaceutical branded growth hormone, the dose is 1 bolus at night before bed. It has nothing to do, you're not supposed to be taking it throughout the day. And for what you said also, so you get these spikes, but you're not getting this, you get a much nicer curve when it's taken in big bolus. The other 2 issues is growth hormone is a cytokine. The receptor doesn't the growth hormone receptor doesn't translocate into the cell. If you inject growth hormone into a cell, the body senses it as a cytokine attack, and your immune system will destroy up to 20% of it. So especially now you're using a generic growth hormone, let's say it's 50% weaker than a pharma growth, and then you stick it in your muscle. Now you got another 20% that you just lost, right? So again, it doesn't matter how fast it peaks. If it's not doing anything, it has to go sub-Q. Peptides should always go sub-Q. They should never be injected in muscle. You wouldn't stick insulin in your muscle. That's just not the way to use it unless you want to go into a coma. That's what would occur if you start using that IM. But you don't do growth hormone IM.
Yeah, I think what I was coming at from mine then is like the absorption profile. Even though one is longer acting or slower releasing, the actual amount of plasma growth hormone you get from an IM shot versus a sub-Q, whilst they're on different time scales, the overall growth hormone response is still in line with 10 IUs being administered. Just one rapidly hits you and the other matches your like 10 to 12 hour release into your system.
Yeah. Isn't there like the growth hormone binding protein? That's a truncated receptor, right? So growth hormone doesn't 7-hour, yeah, of course. So growth hormone doesn't have to dissociate from these binding proteins. It can actually bind to the cell surface.
Yeah, some depends. Each binding receptor,
binding
protein has a different destination. So, and that's also when you're testing serum IGF. That's really all you're seeing is the bound stuff. That doesn't mean it's going into muscle. Again, it depends what's going into muscle that's acting on the muscle, not going into muscle. What's interacting with the growth hormone receptor on the muscle.
Right.
It's like certain binding proteins will send it to the kidney, certain to the bones. Like that's what the issue is, right? Because in acromegaly, you see these IGF numbers of 1,000, 2,000. These guys aren't muscular or lean. They have massive hands and deformed heads, right? And big feet. It's not, those binding proteins it's not advantageous to have them bind to those. And the higher the estrogen level, the more binding proteins are produced. Again, it's your body's way of protecting what's going on. Nature doesn't want females to become overly muscled.
Yeah. Well, but so you can see that in my wife now, right? She's pregnant, estrogen sky high, undetectably high. Growth hormone levels also undetectably high. Didn't gain an ounce of muscle.
Yeah, of course.
Well, she eats more protein than before.
If estrogen was anabolic, people would just inject estrogen.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that, yeah. Unless your estrogen is low. And then you can always take the Anabol, It's not the end of the world. Take a look at the Anabol.
Anabolic.
Yeah, at least it's anabolic. Yeah, so what I'm wondering is between these bolus injections and the sub-Q injections, if there's also some sort of change on how the growth hormone binds to the growth hormone binding proteins and limits the rate of anabolism that way. That's what I was always wondering.
Yeah, I mean, even, some of the discussion would be around an IM injection to a child versus a sub-Q to a child, but more so sub-Q because of its pharmacokinetics being across that 10-hour period. You're giving it for growth hormone deficiency before bed to mimic what would be produced in deep sleep.
Yeah.
And to prevent blocking of glucose uptake as well, right? If you take it in the morning, now you're blocking your ability to eat, right? And the bodybuilders compensate by then taking insulin. And just this like vicious cycle. Maybe just don't use your growth hormone like that.
You're blunt forcing it with insulin because people ask me, from which dose of growth hormone do I need to start taking insulin? You don't need to. You just need to time your growth hormone intelligently and do a lot of activity to improve your insulin sensitivity. Because if the free-form fatty acids inhibit insulin substrate 1, then insulin doesn't do anything.
Adding more insulin will make you more insulin resistant.
Exactly.
Which is, counterintuitive. And I think, this is where basal insulin, if you're not taking growth hormone and you're using basal insulin to take some offload to pancreas, like 20 IUs, that would be your basal response in the background. For a longevity perspective, perhaps we covered this before, but as soon as you start adding in growth hormone where you're potentially becoming insulin resistant, this increased insulin from your basal use is just going to create more problems. So you don't, as soon as you start seeing HbA1c issues or glucose sensitivity issues with growth hormone, you have two choices. You either lower your growth hormone dose or you stop it, correct the insulin sensitivity problem and restart again. I think that was, when people ask me about why I choose like 3 or 4 days for my training days, it's for that exact reason. On my rest days, I'm giving my glucose tolerance a break.
I do think with activity and a little bit of carnitine, you can mitigate a lot of these insulin resistance problems from growth hormone. And that's why you don't really see insulin resistance with guys that are physically active, because they take care of the free-form fatty acids and they're not always glycogen loaded. They don't have a boatload of saturated fat in their skeletal muscle. So their insulin sensitivity is sustained even on higher doses of growth. Right? And then especially if you take metabolics with that, the SLU and the MOTC and whatever, you can eat a boatload of carbs and take a boatload of GH and still stay insulin sensitive. Until you do overdo the carbs and take away the protein and go with fruit only. Yeah. This might be a bit too much. Imagine if you do long-acting growth hormone and sugar fasting.
We're
Need
just
some
putting
needs-
it.
And then bam, 15, bro. Throw the DMP at it. To offset. Offset the free forfeit, yes.
Yeah, I think we're heading into another, I think, renaissance of mitochondrial uncoupling with BAM15 becoming more available. What was once like a forbidden chemical, it's slowly becoming a bit more mainstream. That
People throw
You
out
know,
the BAM15 in the mod scene SLU, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? You don't understand how this shit works? Yeah, but this study showed that it doesn't have that much free radicals. Yeah, but you're fucking dumbass. I mean, I'm all for experimentation, but I got to draw the line somewhere, man. What about Adipotide? If you want to kill your kidneys, go for it.
I think like DNP, there's probably some intelligent scenario to BAM15 and mitochondrial uncoupling. But again, you have to really understand what you're doing in the grand scheme of it by uncoupling and basically producing a lot of unspent energy by your body. That I think there's other ways that can be done. That's not to say you can't use it, but
I'm sure we could design a protocol where it's perfectly safe and very effective. I just don't want to.
I mean, in the past,
I'm gatekeeping that fucking information because I already looked at it and I know exactly how to do it correctly. And I just don't want to. I got to draw the line somewhere, man. Just like height protocols. I know exactly how to do it. When you're 12 years old to 16 years old, I know exactly how to gain a foot. Just going to gatekeep it because I don't want to be responsible for somebody doing it wrong and then their kids end up fucked, you know? So there's limits to what we can do, man.
I think, yeah, no matter how intelligent, sometimes the chemistry is best kept to ourselves.
Yeah, and just otherwise ask the B team. There's a B team of educators out there. Just ask them. They'll gladly, for $100 consultation, sure, man.
Yeah.
They'll gladly tell you, fuck up your kids or fuck up your health. They'll gladly do it. It's just not me.
Yeah.
Let's
like Halo on the cycles.
Yeah, shit like that, yeah.
Let's see what this comes up with. I'm on
no name calling,
here.
Dean.
No, please.
Yeah, just ask. So the funny thing is, if you want protocols like this, you just ask ChatGPT. You don't even need to ask an educator because ChatGPT will write out a protocol for height protocols, which is pretty accurate. Mm-hmm. Especially if you ask Perplexity with a paid version where it integrates Grok and the latest GPTs and all together.
That's what I have here.
It's pretty fucking good, man.
Let's see what it says here. I've asked it based on what I know. God.
It's not bad. Need some nuance, need some dietary adjustments, but it's not bad, man. 5 more years, nobody watches the Anabolic Roundtable. You just type it into Perplexity and then get exactly what you need. And they're like, these fuckers just said they were limiting the information.
Wow, this is scary.
I know, right?
Not that I'm condoning anyone goes and does this, but what this is, whoa.
Where all 3 of us can retire from consultations in a few years. That's what I do now. All right. Kurt's got a busy day. So let's wrap it up here. It's been 2 hours, guys. It's been long enough. I hope you got what you paid for. The Anabolic Roundtable. Next month, middle of August, July. Hopefully I'll be a daddy by the time. Jesus fucking Christ. My wife's like, yeah, I'm due. So when? Yeah, soon. I've been waiting like 2 weeks. I think I got to wait another week. But next time I'll be a daddy, and then I'll join you two in the sun of being the most handsome anabolic daddies on the planet. So any parting words for this episode? Don't do fruit fasting. Don't do Trevogrumab and Garetosmab.
Yeah.
Just take TRT plus growth hormone, shut the fuck up, and maybe avoid the ones with Poloxamer 188 so you can prevent kidney damage. I think that's the takeaway for this episode. And again, guys, there's no Trevogrumab in these cannons, and it's not bad for, having not done crazy cycles in a while. Still 230 pounds. If you're less than 230 pounds thinking about these compounds, I got news for you.
Unless
I
you're
got
a
others.
billionaire.
Yeah. Just get billionaire status first, and then I'll source it for you. No problems. You can find all their social media links down below. Kurt's got a forum. Dean's got a website. They are available for consultations. These guys know a fuckload. Some things more than me. That's why we get them on every week or every month. So I can learn something new. Steve, I want to be on the Anabolic Roundtable. No, I got Kurt and Dean. It's enough for me. Guys, this was a pleasure. Kurt, enjoy your consultation soon. And we'll catch up soon, okay?
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys.